Right. You haven't looked in here that long?
Apparently not. A few weeks. What's happening?
Oh, that's gotta be what it is for sure.
Yeah. That should be.
I think it's been 7 minutes.
It takes 10 to 20.
I should have just done the boardroom login.
Yeah, it can take a while sometimes, hopefully.
Oh, there we go. Oh. Hi.
Uh-oh.
Not there yet. Several minutes, okay.
Yeah, Brenda was telling me there was a huge update to the software. So we can call this meeting to order, Design Advisory Panel meeting on December 15th, 2020. Can I get someone to move the adoption of the agenda? Assuming everyone's looked it over. Marie, can I get a seconder? I see Kate. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Has everybody looked at the minutes of the previous meeting? Can I get someone to move the adoption of the minutes? I see Tony, seconder. Charles? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Now we'll get into item 4, the presentations. The first one is DP 1165 on Shenton Road. Is it Lainey or Caleb that can do the introduction?
Caleb is first.
Great. Thank you. Yes, the first item on tonight's agenda is development permit 1165 for 3789 and 3801 Shenton Road. These properties were rezoned to Corridor 2, the mixed-use corridor zone, 3 years ago. The proposal is for a mixed-use development consisting of 2 buildings on a shared underground or under the building parking structure. The development will consist of 14 residential dwelling units, approximately 1,019 square meters of medical office space, and an 84 square meter commercial retail unit. Building 1 will be 3 stories, and building 2 will be 5 stories. The relevant design guidelines are the general DP area design guidelines. 2 variances have been requested, identified at this time. One is a building height variance, and one is an underground parking structure front yard setback variance. I'll ask the applicant to now begin the presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you're able to see me and hear me. My name is Donna Heath.
We hear you.
Hello. And I'm presuming the rest of my team is somewhere here. I don't see them online. And here we put up a diagram of our development. So back 3 years ago when the project was rezoned, it wasn't our client that owned the property. It was a different group that did the original rezoning. But really the form and character is very similar to what the rezoning was based on. Our clients are the dental group who own the property directly south of this property. And it's their intention to hopefully develop building 1 to house their expanded dental practice. And then building 2 to have a small commercial retail space with the condo development in it. One difference now between the rezoning application and the current set of plans is the original rezoning actually showed the building in the setback area itself. And of course there are some issues around that, and we've been working through our environmental engineer and with the province, and we've brought the building out of that setback area. So we don't show development in that area at all. We've been working very closely with our architectural, landscape architect and civil engineering team to come up with a project with lots of amenities that afford a mixed-use strata development where we have commercial and residential basically living and working in the same area. And I'm going to let our team speak more to that. Part of the rezoning process involves basically the swapping of some of the land. So down near the Steve Marshall Ford to the north of us, our proposal includes some development there for the parklands that we'll be working on to create that amenity down at the end. As was mentioned, for the variances that we've requested, you'll see the majority of our parking is below grade, and we've maximized that while staying within our setback areas as much as we can. So from this point on, I'm going to ask our architect, Glenn Hill, to walk us through the project a bit before we turn it over to our landscape architect, Victoria Drakeford, and our civil engineer, Drew Vida-Reeden, is with us as well.
Okay, I'm just going to adjust my share screen because I'm not looking at you whenever I present. So hopefully that's better. So at least I'm looking at you guys while I'm talking. So okay, can everybody see that fine? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, guys, thanks so much for your time this evening. Thanks, Donna, for introducing the project. As she said, we're presenting a project named Elements on Diver Lake. It's a mixed-use development of medical office space and other commercial office space in one building, and a large-story residential building beside that, adjacent to a park. So just scroll through some of our cards here to present the project. The subject property is located here on the north edge of Diver Lake, and has been a sort of rezoning process over the past number of years. And what our intention was through the rezoning was essentially to complete the Shenton Road street with the developable areas, and so we feel like we're kind of achieving that well. The site does have some complications, but we've been able to navigate that as well. The context here shows Steve Marshall is on our left. And then we have the dentist, who's actually the owner of the property now, is right adjacent to the property. And then we have the development that houses a structural engineering firm, a construction company, and a mechanical consultant company, and a few other professional offices to the east. So another sort of fitting use of the zoning in the street. And then we get into some lighter industrial area as we go around the corner on Shenton Road. On the north side of the highway is the mall with various restaurants, and then the residential neighborhood to the north with a pedestrian overpass located just on the northwest corner, which is the major intersection from to get you across the Island Highway. So that kind of lays the land a little bit. There's also the EN railway line passes along on the north side of Shenton Road, which is sandwiched between Shenton and the Old Island Highway. There's a well-used pedestrian walkway, bicycle path that I'm sure most of you have probably used at some point. This diagram illustrates the larger piece that we had to work with through the rezoning, how we then, it was a series of land swapping and dedication of park space to finalize a site that is defined by this with its environmental setbacks. And this diagram sort of shows how we're kind of squeezing the buildings in behind the riparian zone. So that's how we arrived at this through the rezoning process and the dedication of park, how we ended up with a developable property as you see on the screen here. Just wanted to point out some of the project data, proposed site coverage. Caleb has already introduced the kind of the zoning for so the land uses all work well. We have a proposed site coverage of 60%, which is significantly lower than the allowable given our riparian areas and protection areas. We have a total floor area that equates to an FAR ratio of about 0.42 as opposed to the allowable 1.25. And then we have our building heights, which we can talk about. The office building doesn't have a variance. The residential, with being 5 stories, we are going to be asking for a variance, which we can illustrate to you in a little bit. And then we have parking stalls. The 58 stalls are required. We're actually providing a little bit more just in order to satisfy a bit more amenity on the plaza level, and we can look at that in the pipeline. So this is a more detailed illustration of our site plan. So we have Shenton Road running east-west, and an access point to the west of the property, which is the lowest part of the property as far as the grade goes, to allow us to get down into a below-grade parkade. We have the residential building here. We have a centralized plaza area that would service the little commercial space on the residential building, and also provide parking for the office building with its own entryway, and then a third entry off of Shenton Road into the other surface level parking, which would also service the three-story office building. The sort of the views here quite quickly just goes to show you this the three-story office building with it sort of stepping back. This view, and then we've got the view looking at the residential building here, from here looking towards the residential, and then this is the residential as you are driving or moving eastward across Shenton Road. So we have the primary residential building is here, and the medical building is here, separated by surface parking and the access ramp down into the lower parkade. Our lower parkade, we come down into here, we have, it's a shared parkade, so there are, we anticipate that there would be people parking down here, doctors, dentists, perhaps other people working in the office building. And then we have provided the oversized, secure parking garage type spaces for the residential building. It was difficult for us to organize a dedicated below-grade parking garage for the residential, given the location of the residential building here and the office building here. So what we did, or what we're testing out, is the idea of extra secure parking for residences, while this can be used as an open public parkade during the business hours of the commercial space. This little diagram real quickly just kind of tests and proves out our average grade calculation, which establishes our building heights. So a couple of vignettes. Wanted to illustrate the building and its context and its sort of form and character relative to other buildings that are relatively new. Here you can see the development, which is the mechanical consultants and the contractors' offices and stuff. And so this is our two-story, three-story office building, and then our five-story, which will be flanking what is, we're hoping is going to be quite a nice little park space between the car dealership and the residential. In the foreground is the bicycle shop, and then the neighborhood surrounding. A little bit of a close-up sort of shows the context of those plaza levels with the office building and the residential building sitting. This is the rail grade, and that's the tow path and the bike path and Shenton Road down here. You can see we have, we've kind of placed our model into Google Earth to kind of give a representation of the kind of stellar views to the south that we're going to have, the shoulder of Mount Benson, and then of course across the lake to the south side of town. This vignette illustrates the form and the massing relative to the highway looking east. So we're looking at our five-story residential building and Diver Lake, and then the other professional offices along Shenton down to the more industrial side of Shenton Road where Kenworth. This zooms in a little bit just to give you an idea of the street context. We would be building a new road and sort of new sidewalk and plaza levels in front of both of our buildings, and we're hoping that this vegetation will all come back as we naturally restore the vegetation as part of the development. This is our 3D rendered model to give you a bit more of a perspective around the building. So our 5-story building, we've strategized the use of materials to kind of play with the massing of the building. The roof lid is an undulating roof canopy that sits over the building and as the building terraces back and forth in behind the riparian setback from Diver Lake. We've created 3-story masses that wrap around the corner to kind of reduce the scale and provide a level of interest on all of the facades. We've utilized a simple palette of 3 or 4 materials. This white element would be perhaps a larger stucco plane or a monolithic plane with wood siding and gray hardy siding. So you can see the top floor on this elevation is the lighter color, which spills down and creates the sort of shoulders, the 3-story shoulders on either side of the residential building. We introduced a larger glass and a darker hardy material or a cement panel material on the front side of the office buildings with the bigger windows. We've also introduced some Brise Soleil solar shades and stuff to kind of, as we get into the design, we can talk about how we're going to mitigate some of the passive solar gain off of the office. So that's a bit of a fly around the other side of the residential. The key thing that drove the design of our residential building was how do we really celebrate the views of the lake to the south, the sunlight, while presenting an elegant form that addresses the north side and the highway, but also tries to mitigate highway noise in order to create a comfortable and very livable environment for the people living in the residential building. You can sort of see that by the massing is slightly more solid on this side. We have the same 3-story elements that wrap around and create that visual interest on the east and on the west. So it would be here and here. We've identified the primary entry of the residential with the darker material and an idea of being able to glaze the public area when you come out of the elevator so that if it receives a little bit more highway noise, it's more about the animation of people coming and going from the residence. That would be a projector of life and occupation of the building. This glazing element is an idea that we take one of the exit stairways and provide some partial visuals so that people choose to be fit instead of choosing an elevator, would be able to kind of come up and down the staircases, and that again would be part of the animation of people living, residing, and giving that eyes on the street and animation and activity in the street. With the office building, we've created similar long, deep overhangs for people to arrive under shelter into the glassy ground floor. The elevator and the stone shoulder is another sort of material wayfinder to identify the primary entry of the office building. The same that we've done here, and then our long canopy is also extended across the front of the residential building to kind of give that human scale, and we've enriched the materials with a stone which we can choose and the materials and we'll go through the process. So this is our general overview. This is ideas that we have for our materials. Probably one of the things that jumps out is the living green wall system. This is an opportunity for us to, I don't know if you can see it right here, but I can do a little zoom, but on this side of the building, in this plaza, we have a green hanging wall system that would be part of a screening for the residential units on this side to create a bit of a buffer between office space and this flat lower plaza level. So we're really excited to kind of integrate some of those vertical green features as part of a balcony system. Other materials are fairly, respond to the natural environment. We're looking at a rich wood look color that would be through our wood look metal siding, dark and light gray in our hardy materials, and then we still have a wood look wood fascia, and then complementing colored flashing, so that overall our building is sort of a nice, quiet, consistent, and but quite refined. Quite refined palette of materials. We've got this pearl stone is the thing that runs up here and provides the entryway for our residential building. Sort of getting into some of the elevations, which are, you can see, this is a sort of two-dimensional view of our residential building with the entryways, ramps and walkways for accessibility to the front door, the residential building, or the commercial retail space in here, which is adjacent to this middle plaza level, and then our office building with the same metal, glass, stone, and our quieter shoulder material pieces that bring a bit of organization to the material palette. These building sections kind of give you an idea of the residential building. This is slicing through the plaza space, being able to look at that green wall that provides a buffer screen for the deck spaces off the residential unit. And then you can see our arcade is buried all along Shenton Road, is buried below the plaza level and partially exposed on the Shenton Road side. This is the other direction, looking at the office building. So we kind of shouldered and stepped the building back to follow the setback of the lake. This gives you some more two-dimensional elevations of the office building, the primary entry with the big canopy, bringing people from parking around the building, undercover into the front door. There would be a secondary primary entrance for the ground floor dental office. If that's the case, then we have an opportunity to do that. Otherwise, this is the big kind of architectural form that would be the address of the office building. And then this is the view out towards Dagger Lake, or the elevation, sorry. And again, similar kind of sections that help you to understand how we've kind of created masses and forms and broken down the overall form of the building through the use of materials and overhangs to kind of invite people up to the building and keep them dry as they enter. The residential building, again, illustrates our three-story massing elements that tries to play an interesting game of undulating back and forth to create visual interest and capture shadows on the south side, especially as the sun comes around. There'll be a lot of dynamics under the roof shadowing through these projections, which are also covered deck spaces for the residences, and then our little commercial piece on the bottom floor next to the plaza. The entry level, the Shenton Road side again illustrates that this is the key kind of entry point with our canopies over the top, and then our elevator shaft, and then that sort of quieter facade, trying to mitigate as much of that highway noise as possible for the residential component that is beyond the shared hallway and entryway. I think that this illustrates the water feature, the green feature that runs vertically through that, and Victoria can speak to that a little bit whenever we roll through the rest of the elevation drawings that sort of show covered decks, covered canopies, over decks to provide sheltered outdoor living spaces for the residential unit. And and so as Caleb mentioned, we have a couple of variances. One is to project the arcade. You can see this is the riparian setback from the lake, and so in order to achieve a usable parking area below grade, we have asked that we push the rear wall back to the property line, noting that this part of the parkade would be completely underground and not seen from Shenton Road at all, but with the inclusion of a 15-meter riparian setback and a 2.5-meter road dedication take from Shenton Road, we really got kind of hemmed into a tight parking structure, but we've been able to make it work, and as long as we can kindly ask for that variance to push up to the property line, that would make it a successful parking structure for us. The second one is, the second variance is for the height, and we have a scenario where I mentioned earlier where these parking stalls that are identified here in red are essentially, they're kind of like underground garages inside a parkade for the residential units. So the idea is that if you live here, you can basically roll in your car into this parking space. There would be additional area for some storage for a bike and that kind of thing. But there may be an opportunity for us to look at there being a secondary garage door or a mesh roller shutter that would come down to provide additional safety and security for residents. And then the rest of the parking would be open during the business hours where people would be coming and going visiting the offices. So with that said, we ended up with a variance, or we ended up with 71% of our parking below the building, and understanding that 75 is the key number for the additional height. We do have an option. We just wanted to kind of table this because we feel that it's a really interesting way to provide more safety and security for the residential, and although it does eliminate the 3 parking stalls below grade, that would equate to the 75% total underground parking to give us the additional height. And with that additional height, we would only be asking for a variance of 2.4 meters to, as illustrated in that diagram, that's the variance if we can somehow discuss and come to a solution over that. The worst case scenario would be that we can find the additional parking. We just think that right now this is a really interesting opportunity to express a way to kind of provide lots of safety and security for people living in a mixed-use development where the parking is going to be shared. So that's, this kind of illustrates the differences. You just reload with regular parking stalls, and the residential occupants would just be sort of hanging out there with other people that are coming and going from the building. So there are ways that we can discuss it, but we just wanted to show you that those are the variances that we're asking for. So Victoria, I know that you're on there somewhere. Would you like to take over and talk about the fun stuff?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Oh dear. I hope my dog will probably bark, for which sorry. So this looks a bit lurid, but the main thrust of the landscape was to, it's this really a very formal sort of plaza structured landscape, and then basically the riparian area, and we brought the riparian area where we could up into the rain gardens and the buffers, but otherwise the street, the rest of it is very structured. And so what we tried to do was, I'm really sorry about this. Okay, sorry. So what we tried to do with the planting is have very, very full kind of soft forms and texture and evergreen, and to make as much of that planting as possible, to use as much the conifers on the side to frame the project, and then and because it's restricted with planting depth as well, and so apologize.
The dog wants to get involved with this.
Right, let me regroup here. Okay, so we've got this planters with structured planting and really soft evergreen plants with really interesting textures, and then it goes into the riparian, which is much softer. So and we have a lot of green infrastructure. We have green roofs. We have the nice green wall structure and rain gardens. We've got rain gardens in the front coming up the green roofs in the residential building. So at street level, you can see the rainwater coming off. Thank you. Green roofs down the rain chains and into basins, which then will fall into other basins and then flow into the main rain gardens, which are at the rear of the property. And then, this gives the idea of the fullness that we're trying to create. So even though it's really structured, it starts to, the architecture is there, but we're softening, we're blurring the edges slightly. And I kind of like the way it's different, like you've got contours framing it on the far edges, but the central office is framed by these deciduous trees which have slightly more root berm, so they'll be bigger, and then we've got the little ones at the bottom, and so it's all kind of, it's asymmetrical, but it kind of plays with the forms of the architecture as well. So, and then when so I think that really describes the front, and where the walls are seating height, there'll be seat walls and that kind of thing. And so as we go, and the lighting, I might as well mention that. So we have the idea is that on that little photograph, we'll have the strip lighting along under the walls and around. So everything's very sort of muted and won't be in your face, but it'll also add to that kind of linear, horizontal feel of the landscape at night. And then, if you flip to the plan. So we were talking about, one of the staff comments was the surfaces, so, and Donna can elaborate on this, but we have to have a concrete parking surface, which is a slightly, what I understand, slightly darker grey and then in the parking areas, and then we really wanted to keep, one of the staff comments was to try maybe to mesh this together as a sort of courtyard kind of feel, but we would really like to keep the pedestrian area separate from the vehicles, because the hope is that we might get a cafe on the retail, the residential, and then people are going in and out of appointments on the dental, so I think there'll be a lot of traffic going in and out, so we'd like to keep everyone separate, the pedestrian and the vehicle separate, and then we have scored concrete in the pedestrian areas, and we've added some benches which would again be concrete benches that kind of mimic the walls and the horizontal feel that we have going on in the front. So we've just kind of again, it's that breaking down and sort of shifting to here, and then the hope is that we have a cafe, and then the hope would be that we have little bistro tables and chairs that can just get moved through this whole space, and people can just move them around as they want the views of the sun and the wind. So that's our intent. And we did discuss lots of different scenarios, but we like to keep some flexibility in that space. And then the riparian area, which is a separate exercise, but it's really fantastic if this project goes in, because every single invasive plant you've ever seen is in that. This is just devoid of any kind of biodiversity, so it's amazing. If this and the little park can get next door to the north can get restored, it'll be a fantastic addition to this project, because all the views are out there, and so so the idea on that one is to put as many different plants as possible in there, and conifers, and we'll try and concentrate the conifers to where the parking lots are, and keep some view corridors out from the building. And I just had a little tiny sketch of that somewhere on the other one, of the little balcony system, green wall system. And the green roof, so that, what happened to the green of the green roof? Anyway, there's an extensive system of green roofs, and again, it's for stormwater, and Drew can speak to the stormwater a little bit more detail afterwards, but the idea is that there's a series of green roofs at different levels, and that can be seen from all the different stories, and again, it's adding to the biodiversity of the site, and if you look at a plan view, there's really not much. There's a lot of green given the riparian area and the roofs on this site, so yeah, this is just because we have to give a full revegetation plan at this point. The DP, so these drawings are just really just planting plans for that restoration, and then the investigation, which is part of that. We can keep going through that, and then the park restoration. So I just carried on that same planting scheme, as many plants that I think will grow in this space. And just planting them randomly and seeing which plants do best. Hopefully all of them. As Drew ran?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, so with stormwater management, we are obviously trying to achieve, will achieve the criteria set out in the engineering standards. So it's kind of threefold. There's a detention requirement to retain those large storm events. There's a retention requirement, which is for the smaller, more frequent rainfall events. And then there's stormwater quality targets that we're trying to hit as well. While, like Victoria said, there's a lot of green on the site plan overall. We're actually very limited as far as space where we can fit the stormwater management features in because of that riparian. We can't be inside of that riparian setback. So we have kind of decentralized the stormwater. We've got 3 different rain gardens proposed where we have some space along the south of the building and tucked up right against the riparian setback, and with the intention there of kind of directing runoff from the different buildings and the different parking areas to these different stormwater features. So on the detention side of things, we will have the green roofs, the extension of green roofs on building 1, which will give us a large amount of volume, and then we will get the extra volume that we need out of these 3 different rain gardens. Retention is basically achieved mainly through absorbent landscaping, and for that there's both the green roofs, the plantings that will take place on top of the rain gardens, but also we have that large riparian area that will be revegetated, and the water from the different rain gardens will discharge into those in a diffuse manner so that you can get a lot of absorption there. And for stormwater quality, same thing, because we don't have one central stormwater area, we're going to have a combination of mechanical water quality feature, which would be an oil water separator, which is going to handle the more heavily contaminated flows off the parking lots and out of the parking garage, and then that will also then drain through one of the rain gardens. And those rain gardens will have that ability to also filter and provide stormwater quality aspects to anything draining off the non-green roof areas. So with the combination of all those features, we are confident we will hit the engineering requirements for stormwater management. And that's about it for me.
Anything else from Donna or Glenn or anybody else?
No, I think that we want to leave time for questions, and it's a big project and it's got a lot of stuff going on, so we really welcome a healthy discussion.
Good. Thank you very much for the presentation. The staff members, does any of the panel members have questions for staff? Seeing none, unless I'm not seeing everybody, so assuming there's nobody that has questions for staff, so then I would like to open up for questions for the applicant. Let's start with Tony.
Mute. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. This is an excellent project and very, very comprehensive presentation. There's a lot of information here, and all of it was very, very interesting. Just fundamentally, from the form of character point of view, just to start off, it's a very clean, contemporary looking design, obviously high quality with nice materials. What's interesting from my point of view as an architect is I like the consistency between the two buildings. We're using a lot of similar features and elements, materials, colors, but each has a very distinct identity, and they both hang together very nicely. So compliments on that. Compliments also on working with a very challenging site, all the restrictions that you're looking at. I don't have any particular issue with either of the variances, so I guess without rattling on too long, the only thing that I wasn't clear in the presentation, and I guess is of concern, is the actual view from Niagara Lake. I'm not sure about that entire exposed parking wall that's sticking out, and I wondered if you could comment on that, the applicant, or maybe even show something graphically that I find that maybe others didn't, but that's the only concern I have whatsoever here. Otherwise, I think it's an excellent project from the former character. I think it'd be a great thing once complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. With the applicant?
I think
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just thinking that, Victoria might be able to answer this as well, but the ambition with the restoring the riparian area is that it has an opportunity to kind of regrow in an organic manner, and hoping that it would eventually sort of take over the bottom part of the parkade, and that would be screened. I understand that there would probably be a period of time where it's a little exposed, but we're kind of hoping that the landscape is going to enjoy its fresh freedom to go and do its thing, because it's we'll be leaving it to be completely naturalized again. Isn't that right, Victoria?
Yep. Yep, it will be planted. It will be hidden. With the number of plants that are going in that riparian area, it will disappear eventually, but it's just time.
Okay, thank you. Steve, would you like to jump in?
Thanks, everyone. That was a great presentation, very thorough. Thank you very much. I love the project. It looks beautiful. It definitely is a great addition to the city. I did have one question actually in regards to the garage, the residential garages. What's the heights? Are the heights going to be different to the commercial parking spots? I didn't get that clear answer, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so the parking garages that or the parking spots that are allocated for the residential will still be within the parking garage height. So we're not reducing the height of the parking garage. It will be basically, the parking garage is a consistent height with your typical structural concrete roof, and then each of the stalls that are located between the structural columns would have we're just basically widening the residential stalls to make them bigger so that there's a bit more space and they're a bit more comfortable than your typical underground parking stall. And then so the reason for that was a way to kind of create a sense of a bit more privacy and security and a bit more space for the residential units to utilize or have more amenity in the parking carriage. So we're still exploring how that might develop and whether it will develop at all, depending on our conversation with, the planning around the percentage of parking beneath. So, we'll be responding to that. But essentially, it's taking a typical parking stall and just supersizing it for people that are living there and sharing the parking space with guests coming and going.
I love
The other part that I just wanted to, we did a bit of research on the type of people and lifestyle that this type of building would appeal to. And because of its location and proximity to things like bike and walking trails, its proximity to a lake and basically access to major transportation, we felt that the type of lifestyle people living in this building will be lots of outdoor activities. So people who have bicycles, people who may have kayaks, that they may want to use in the lake. So we wanted to understand and realize that those people are going to need some extra space to store those types of facilities to accommodate their type of lifestyle.
That makes complete sense, and the reason why I was asking is I commend you for doing this, commend you, sorry, not condemn you, for taking a stab at this. The reason why I was asking was the heights, really, because of engineering and whether they'd be different heights would pose a bunch of different challenges. But if they're the same heights as the rest and oversized, and I think having some sort of screening would be fabulous, and I think it would be great from a sales perspective and keeping those residential spots open. Apart from that, and I was just more curiosity than anything, Glenn and Donna, I love the project, and you do a comparison of what's been ongoing for, it seems like 10 years in that area. It's about time that it gets developed, and it's a great looking project. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. Kate?
Okay, there you go. Thank you, everyone, for your presentation. I agree with what has been said. You're very thorough and comprehensive in explaining your project. I too had the same question as Tony about the view from Diver Lake, but I did understand that the planting would eventually reduce the impact of that building from the lakefront. But it is a small lake that you often only see. I think the bigger concern is the scale of the building to whomever is on the lake, but anyway, that's just the way it is. I was wondering about common amenity space for the residents of the building. Is there, sorry if I missed it, I know there's green roofs, but was there an extensive roof? Or is the only space for the residents the benches sort of dispersed throughout the site? Yeah. Anyone?
Do you want me to speak to that one?
Sorry, I muted myself. But yes, because I think there are other things beyond the setbacks that I'll let you you can comment and I can jump in if you like.
Okay. So I think that question really, Kate, is twofold, because I know that we generally look at outdoor amenity spaces being only critical to people who live in the condos, for instance. But I really need to speak to that one thing that we've discovered is that outdoor amenity space is also really critical to the commercial space, not only just for staff, and so I'll speak to that first. So anyone coming to see a dentist or a doctor of any type at this point in time generally comes in twos. That will be the case for our dental group here because they are sedation specialists. So people will be, when they come in a car, they'll be coming with someone else who's going to have to wait. And that's how we created on that upper plaza, that outdoor seating space, because that second person, and COVID has just truly pointed this out is never going to really be allowed into the office. So rather than waiting in their car, we actually want them to get out of their car. We want them to sit on our hard plaza surface spaces. That's why Victoria spent quite a lot of time with our planters at the front, creating some low-level lighting that is not glaring, but giving space where people can actually sit in amongst the landscaping. The other reason we added the commercial space into the residential building was to give a space to draw those people out of their cars and to have somewhere to actually go. We're hoping to get a cup of coffee. There's also an interconnected piece that could take you down to that lower landscape area near the lake. And so that's really where you see the interaction of the common space between the people in the condos. You'll notice for the majority that their outdoor balconies all face the lake. That's why services like stairs and elevators are all towards the road to block that noise so that doesn't become the centerpiece of the condo itself. It faces the lake and the mountain views. That common commercial space downstairs is an area to draw those residents out along with plaza seating in amongst our landscaping. And then, like we mentioned, there is the intention to have stairs down to that replenished area down the lake to be able to get those people right down to the lake level. We're not proposing putting benches or anything at that level because that is the setback area, but we do realize that people are going to interact on that at that level as well.
Thank you. I missed the point that you were having access to the waterfront.
Yeah, it's outside the commercial space at the residential building. It goes down right there.
I don't really have any comments except for one of my favorite buildings will be torn down. That's all.
Thanks.
I like looking at, even though the building's kind of worn down and that sort of mid-century house.
I'm sorry, we took it down already. It's gone. I apologize. It was contaminated and its roof was, we had a situation where homeless people were breaking in and the roof actually caved in.
Yeah.
For safety purposes, we had matted it and had to take it down.
It was just one of those sort of dreamy spaces you could see getting redone. Anyway, understand. But thank you. No, you've done a very thorough job, and I do like, actually one more element, I like the green infrastructure that you're including in the building with the roof and playing around a bit with the green living wall and and the rain garden. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Marie?
Yeah, thank you for a very thorough presentation. For a property or development that's very complex in the sense that you're building on a really difficult lot. I drove by there today, actually, and I got out of the car and I noticed how there's a dip that goes down about a meter, and then all of a sudden you're in marshy land. So I'm assuming that you work with your engineers in the city on how to deal with that, because I really can't imagine how you're going to put an underground garage in there with all that wet. And anyway, I'm not a construction person or an architect, but that must be a major challenge. And in terms of the former character building, I love it. I think it's a great project. I think from the highway, it's going to sort of add a kind of city mature look to that part of the city, which really needs sort of a really different strip that's quite unattractive, and I think the building or the development itself, when it gets up, will actually kind of set the tone for that area and might actually help encourage some more attractive development there as well in the years to come, further down into the industrial area. And I guess my only concern with the building itself was sort of what Tony pointed out from the lake side. I was concerned that you're going to, especially because of all the moisture there, that you're really going to have just a big wall that kind of pushes the marsh back and holds it back, so to speak. And when you're viewing from the lake, that's what you're going to see. And I don't know how many meters that wall is. I wasn't quite too clear on. You didn't give us a lot of images of that view. I'm a little concerned that the growth that you're saying you're expecting might not cover it totally, so that if you're kayaking out there, you're going to see like a big concrete wall, as well as a tall building. Anyway, that would be my only concern. I just don't know what you do about it in that situation. but I think a very sensitive, thoughtful building that considers both the residential and commercial occupants. Very well done, thank you.
Thanks, Marie. Tyler?
Thanks, Kevin, and thanks everyone for the presentation. I don't really have much to add. I think it's a great project, so great that I wish it was the one that was first done on the street to set the tone for all the others that have been done before. I just think it's a nice design. It's right up against the street. I think it's just great. So happy to see this. Depending on what the committee votes, but I feel a certain sentiment being expressed. Happy to see this proceed. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Tyler. I don't really have any issues other than a couple of questions, I think. Donna, or I guess anybody on the applicant's panel there is not going to be an access to the lake, is that correct? Like for residents to be able to take kayaks down to the lake or whatever?
Well, I have to tell you, in the ideal world, we would like to have a pier. Our understanding through discussions with the province is that's an application we make with them, and we would be allowed one single pier from the entire property. So it's not like one per building. We would be allowed one pier from our property. We've already received feedback through our studies that through the province and Department of Fisheries that our project has no detrimental effect on fish habitat. We're not interfering with that, and we want to make sure that we maintain that. But we would like to propose that we eventually have a small pier for, obviously nothing motorized, but a kayak or a rowboat or something like that as an amenity, because what we see, and I talked about it in the lifestyle of people living in the condos, they're going to use the land and the water. That's what we see.
And have you had any discussions regarding the existing public access to the lake, getting that cleared up?
The access to the lake?
Yeah, there's a public access nearby.
Yeah, there's, I think that will be going on with the park development that's going on as well. So, there won't be we're not proposing any type of pier there for the public from the park. I mean, they'll be able to walk up to the waterfront, and we'll be working with staff on really what that end development looks like in terms of people coming to visit the park where they're parking and the like. But there will also be that public access down by Steve Marshall Ford as well.
Right. Because I guess in worst case scenario, people would just have to trek down in that direction. But I wouldn't be surprised if people will use the site walking through the riparian area. And I'm not sure what to do about that, but it probably will be inevitable that will happen. But aside from that, I think you've done a very, very nice job, Donna, and your team. A very, very nice presentation, very thorough, like Steve said. So thank you very much. Very nicely done.
Thank you.
Back to the panel members, I didn't really see any recommendations. Steve, you had kind of a comment regarding the screening of parking. Did you want that as a recommendation?
No, that's not a recommendation. That will get worked out through the next few months, I guess, or year, depending on when you get this off the ground. So I'm sure that'll get figured out, and it doesn't need to be a recommendation.
Okay. Tony?
Not to belabor the point of this parking wall and the view from the lake thing, I've heard the response and I'm not 100% comfortable.
We lost you, Tony. Probably lost his signal.
Yeah.
No, we're still connected. Tony just backed out.
I think Tony lost his Wi-Fi or something.
While we're waiting for it, do you want me to, I can share my screen and go to that slide if you like.
Sure. While you're doing that, Victoria, would you object to putting, like, planting climbers or something in that, along the concrete wall there?
Something weird happening on this. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, no, I don't. I just think, I just think the plants will grow as fast as the climbers, maybe. So, no, I mean, that would be fine. It's just there aren't any native plants that will climb self-clinging. Yeah, I just don't know. I mean, I think the plants will grow, but and I don't know. Yeah, no, I don't have an objection to that if that's the desire of the panel.
There's also an opportunity architecturally to take some of the cladding materials and bring it a little further down the wall to kind of express the mass of the office building to hide some of the parking structure. So, you know, this line could maybe come down a little bit, as with this and this, and we could potentially create a little band under here, and then over here we had an idea. We still need to flush it out whether or not we would want to daylight some of the parking, or whether or not but you know, in areas like here where there's no building, you know, maybe there's a bit more of an intense planting area as part of the restoration or maybe, you know, planting stuff that we know is going to grow quickly and vertical. Victoria, I don't know if there's anything in particular that we could maybe put here to address that as a concern.
Yep.
So is Tony back? I think not. So if I would, I guess, make sort of a recommendation that possibly, as a recommendation, that the applicant look at methods to reduce concrete wall massing on the lake side of the project. Would that kind of keep everybody happy on the panel as a recommendation? That way it gives them an option to either look at methods of landscape materials to screen it, or also, like what Glenn mentioned, which would
Yeah, I took out the wrong stuff. Sorry.
So what is that?
That's the pepper.
Steve, you need to mute yourself. Okay, I still don't see Tony, do I? Okay, so did everyone hear
On the rendering, you show trees in front of, between the lake and the building. And right now, when I looked at the landscape, there's no trees there. It's all
See, the whole of the riparian is diagrammatic, not the whole thing is just plastered with trees 3 meters on center, the whole of the riparian area. So it's more diagrammatic. But if you look at the plant list, I put Doug fir, maple, bitter cherry. There's just all the trees typical to our area. Anyway, the riparian is just, it's actually planted to the density of the new standard, which is really, really dense. But, I mean, there's trees and then there's shrubs. Shrubs at 1 meter centers, and then ground covers at 0.6 meter centers. So, I mean, the amount of plants in that riparian is insane. And so, as I say, there's a lot of plants in there.
So you'd be adding trees in front, like between the lake and the building, right?
Yeah, because that's the riparian. That has to have trees at 3 meters on center. This is the new, I mean, it always was, but they've upped the standards with the new MOEFS. So yeah, I mean, the riparian plan, like, it just wasn't much point in putting samples everywhere because it's a diagram. But if you look at that on L4, you can see the number of trees I've got there. There's 69 of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So where is it? Yeah, anyway, there's a lot of trees.
It looked very marshy to me, and I was wondering, I didn't know what feeds that lake. Like, does the depth of that lake change much, and does it flood into that area? Because it looks very wet, almost right up to the road. And marshy No, it's not right up, it's not that marshy, that weed canary crossing, or there's also other grasses, and which stick did you go to, just where that,
Near the, like where it's the north end of the property.
yeah.
The Diver Lake is fed by this watercourse here, which comes under the highway and is connected to Long Lake.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So is everybody comfortable with the applicant's rationale regarding how that area is going to be treated, or do you want a recommendation?
This is Kate.
Kate, yeah.
I'm confident that with the density of planting, it won't take long for that landscape to take off and mitigate the underground parking.
Okay, everyone's fine with that, so I'm seeing then that we have no recommendations, is that correct? Does anybody want to discuss the variances or any concerns about the variances? There's a front yard setback variance, which the underground parking is encroaching into, and then there's a height variance as well. No discussion
I think they
on...
were good solutions to some difficult problems and don't seem to affect anybody else.
Okay, seeing that there's no recommendations or concerns about the variance, can I get somebody to make a motion then?
I can.
Marie?
I'll let you phrase it.
The appropriate way would be to accept the application as presented, and you can either support the variances or not say anything about the variance.
Okay, we can say we support the variances, I guess.
Okay, so I have a motion on the floor to accept the application as presented with support for the variances. Can I get a seconder for that? Kate? Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So we're going to invite the next one.
Kevin,
Yes.
so Kate and I are presenting, or not presenting. I'm keeping my mouth shut, but Kate will be presenting.
Yes, yep.
Shall we just stay on here and do what we do?
Yeah, you stay on, and we're just waiting, we're waiting for Raymond, I believe, is that right?
We'll shoot him a text.
We still have a quorum without Tony?
That's what I have. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Oh, we don't have a quorum of Tony.
Yeah, we're good. And we have.
We have-
Here, so we're good.
Tyler,
Like that's what I. Does Tyler count? Does Tyler not, Tyler does not count. So yes, we need 4, so we've got 5.
I don't count, Kevin.
yeah, you don't count? Yeah, so
Kevin,
Not at this table.
we only have 3.
include yourself.
Yeah. I only have myself, Marie,
Kate, Charles, and Charles.
and Charles.
Yep. So that's 4.
4 others, 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you sure? Wait. It is Kate, Marie, Charles. Kate's
Kate's part of the presenting
Kate's
team.
not on there.
Oh, wait a minute. So Kate doesn't.
There's myself, Charles,
Marie. And Marie.
Marie,
So
right.
Sarah's
Yeah.
on there.
And Tyler.
Tyler doesn't count.
Tyler doesn't.
Whoa. Where's Tyler?
Oh, where's Tony?
Tony might not, must be having a problem with his Wi-Fi.
Do we have another way to Can we try and call him? Do we have another way? We'll just sit tight and see if we can contact Tony.
Yeah, please hold tight, you guys. We just have to try and get in touch with Tony, otherwise we don't have a forum.
He's not waiting in the queue to be admitted, is he?
No.
No?
I think he probably lost his Wi-Fi signal and he needs to reset it or start Zoom over again. That happened to me one time. I lost my Wi-Fi. I got disconnected. Have everybody's cell phone numbers so they can call. issues with having everybody have each other's cell phone numbers, including having their phone numbers. Yeah, because if somebody's,
Permission to share that. Oh, Lori has, so she's reaching out to him. Yes.
yeah, be something like to have your and or Lori's numbers as well. Because if we get stuck, someone can't make it, there's somebody as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Laney, you're going to be introducing this one.
I tried to reach his office, he's not there, so I guess the best way is to try to contact him by email, to see if we can raise him that way. To see if he'll with us. Are you
Yes, maybe we can say.
Is this still live streamed, Lori? Yes, it is.
Okay, so our next,
Okay, go ahead now.
okay, so our next application is DP 1208 at 497 Menzies Ridge Drive. If I can get a lady to introduce the project, please.
Thanks everyone for your patience. I'm glad we could make a quorum. The next application is 497 Menzies Ridge Drive, DP 001208, and it is for a multifamily townhouse development with 22 units. It is zoned R6, low-density residential, and is designated neighborhood in the official community plan. It falls within development permit area 9, commercial, industrial, institutional, multifamily, and mixed commercial/residential development. And the general development permit area design guidelines apply to the proposed development. There is one variance that has been identified, and that's for the minimum landscape buffer along the side yard from 1.8 meters down to 0 meters. And it looks like we've got Raymond Field and his team here to present. And we've also got Kate, the landscape architect, and some representatives from Menzies Ridge Estates. Go ahead with your presentation.
So I guess I'll just introduce, I'm Chris, and present the project on behalf of our firm. So Ron Neal, like I say, is independent, and Steve Johnson, and landscape is with Kate, and Brian's looking after the civil works. So I guess I'll leave it to you, Karim.
Okay, so the project, as you can see, is, or as we described, is a 22-house unit, townhouse unit, split into 7 buildings. It actually is on Menzies Ridge and Bird Sanctuary on the other side. As you can see on the set line, these buildings are set, that there are 2 buildings on Menzies and 4 in the middle and 1 on the Bird Sanctuary. The development will provide higher quality townhouses, including kids playing area, and it's adjacent to Butters of March, as you can see to the west of the site. This is the view from Menzies Ridge from the north, and this is the view from the east side of Menzies. This is the view from Bird Sanctuary, and the lower 3 views are from the site outwards. As you can see, the area is single-family houses all over, and we're proposing a higher density townhouses. So the intent of the design was to minimize the effect of dense townhouses in the area. That being said, the idea was to create as much units as possible, but maintaining the smaller size so that we don't disturb the single houses in the area, single family area. How we did that is by creating the typical shape of the houses, but each unit is sharing the typical roof with the adjacent unit, and the lower, as you can see, the lower courts are shared between the 2 units. This will create a kind of variability on the side of the street, so that it kind of creates that change and interesting view from the street. And the colors were chosen to were chosen from the neighborhood so that they blend with it, and we chose 4 colors that represent the autumn colors: purple, beige, and brown. As you can see, this is going back to the segment. So the city requires the statutory right of way within the lot, so that we have 6 meters and 2 meters of sidewalk passing through the lot from Menzies Ridge to the Bird Sanctuary. And we added another pedestrian walkway through the site in the middle so that it connects all the buildings to the central kids playing area. Each of the units will have an entrance from the back, from the front for the parking, for the garage and the main entry, and they will have a private backyard that for the most part is accessed from Menzies Bridge and the statutory right of way at the back, and for the middle buildings will be accessed from the common area and kids playing area. Each of the units will have balconies facing the Buttercup March and the drive aisles in between the buildings. And each unit will have an entrance canopy and landscape area in front so that it can keep or increases the privacy of each unit to the street. This is a view towards from the kids playing area. This is kind of remodeled in 3D so that it's kind of flat. It does not actually reflect how the topography of the site is. We'll show this on the plan and civil and landscape will kind of illustrate that more. This is a view from the statutory right of way. As you can see there, behind the building is the garbage enclosure kind of hidden and out of sight. This is the view from the bird sanctuary drive. The required setback from this side is 7.5 meters, but we increased that to about 12.5 meters, allowing for more landscape buffer between the adjacent buildings, adjacent single-family homes and the cul-de-sac. As I mentioned before, the neutral color palette was chosen white and gray, and with colors that represent or were taken from the area of brown, purple, and beige. Cedar wood was added as an accent to represent the area more, as in the Hawthorne area. Going back to the site plan to show you where the garbage enclosure is. So the garbage enclosure will be accessed from the statutory right of way. Each building will have a garage, and there are shared parking stalls on site, on access from the statutory right of way. We have 4 EV parking stalls and 3 handicap parking stalls that will be shared by all units. The layout of the unit itself, the garage will be 11 by 21. That's a foot or 2 feet wider in each direction than required because of the adjacent walls and because it will have the bike rack on the wall to hold bikes for each unit. Each unit is about 1,200 square feet in total, 2 bedrooms plus a den. The materials, as you can see, are mainly the wood on the shared pitched roof shape between the buildings, and the setback part of the building will have the accent color that will kind of blend in with the environment. This is a section going through the garage, showing how the bigger garage will have enough space to have the car and the bike rack that is hanging on the wall. I will let landscape talk about the project, landscape and civil talk about the project, and I will get back to the questions asked by the city, the comments by the city staff after they're done.
Okay, should I share my screen, or do you have the landscape plan?
Sorry, I'll share my screen, just give me.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Good. Okay. Well, thank you all for being here and being attentive and listening. So the landscape for Menzies townhouses is designed to support the families of all ages, with an emphasis on drawing the character, ecological function, and aesthetic from Buttercups Marsh, and bringing that into the urban environment. There are three main features in the landscape design. The first one that Kareem pointed out, the pedestrian walk that goes through the site, connecting Menzies Woods Drive to the other bird thing, I'm forgetting the name, it's connected to the other neighborhood. This pedestrian walk will be concrete unit pavers with bollard lighting and lush green shady plantings with benches situated throughout it for spaces for the residents to occupy. The second main landscape feature is the common play area or central area in the middle of the site. So this is, we've created a naturalized play area with grass and planted play mounds, stepping stone paths, platforms overlooking a densely planted low point designed to evoke the feeling of the marsh. And we've included, for sort of fun and interest, colorful nest boxes that attract birds into the development, emphasizing its location and its connection to the greater nature beyond the marsh, Buttercups Marsh. And the third, and in my opinion, most important part of the landscape is the plants. So the plants I've chosen plants to express the sort of local environment. The planting plan is structured around a foundation of thank you, indigenous species that reference the shady riparian forest and open marshlands, performing vital ecosystem functions necessary to support us and all living beings and create greater biodiversity on site. And so the landscape is actually almost all fully planted, layered from low ground covers, small shrubs, larger shrubs and perennials to deciduous trees throughout the whole space. Some of the design features draw from the architecture, so having sort of modern, nice cedar benches and also fencing. So the backyards of the units, which are on Menzies, like a front yard, will have low front yard fencing, 1 to 2 meter high, and will have a character that's very open and not too closed off, with gateways, with little gates. And there will also be the bollard lighting throughout all the walkways in the site. And we near the garbage enclosure, visitor bike parking has been installed too. Yeah, and I think that's all right now. And if there's any, I'll wait for questions. Thank you.
And maybe I'll just touch briefly on the stormwater management for the site. Kareem, if you could just bring up that landscape plan, and if you wouldn't mind.
You wanted to
Oh, yeah, no, that's
landscape?
great. Yeah, mine. There we go. Perfect. So stormwater management for this property will meet the 3 targets that are laid out in the city standards. One being volume, like stormwater runoff volume reduction. One of them being detention, and the other going to be water quality. The first one, volume reduction, that's going to be met through on-site retention, and that's designed to treat the more frequent smaller storm events. This is going to be done largely through the landscaping on site that Kate spoke about. It's going to be designed to basically be self-contained. Any water that falls on it and is connected to it will infiltrate back into the ground or get taken out by the landscaping. Any shortfall we have in that will be met through a subsurface, like a retention tank system that's at the low portion of the site that heads towards Buttertubs Marsh, which is also the center play area. So below that, most of that area will be taken up by basically a subsurface retention system, which is going to promote infiltration into the ground stormwater. The second target, which is the detention, that's going to be basically detaining the post-development flows from the site to pre-development rate, and this will be done through a flow control manhole at the low end of the storm system right before it outlets towards the marsh, and it'll back up any stormwater into that same subsurface retention area. So it's going to double as a retention / detention tank. And the water quality, that'll be through an oil grit separator, which will be installed on the pipe storm system, which basically picks up all of the impervious areas, largely the parking areas, which is what we're concerned about. They'll pick up in a traditional pipe storm system, pass through the oil grit separator, and then into the retention there. That's pretty much it for stormwater on this property.
Thank you. Anything else that needs to be added, Raymond?
I think Trent probably wanted to talk about a couple of the comments from the staff report, I think, in terms of what we addressed. Or if not, I guess I can talk about it too.
I can address some of the comments. So, for example, the first site design comment was about look at the design purchasing to mitigate potential conflict between proposed public walkway on the east. So they're talking about this here, the walkway. This was required by the city to and the required was 2 meters, 6'7" So we would like, if it's possible, to minimize that to 5 feet. We can have about 60 centimeters, a foot and a half of landscape buffer between the statutory walkway and the adjacent neighbors. The second point was about the garages. I think I covered that. We kind of designed those so that they're a bit bigger than what the typical parking stall is required. I showed them here. So that, and with the wall mount spike, I guess these will be more than enough to have both the bike ramp and the cars in there. There was a question about what are the dimensions of the drive aisle and the walkway or the sidewalk, and this was kind of illustrated here. So 6 meters for the drive aisle and 2 meters for the sidewalk. But if it's possible, we could add a buffer of landscape around that area. And it will help with the existing fences on the neighboring properties as well. Under building design, there were a couple considerations for the material to match the also in the neighborhood. We we'd like to argue that the materials chosen were kind of mimicking the surrounding buildings to some degree, but we chose higher quality materials as in fiber cement and longboard. These will last longer and of a higher quality and look better. The second point was about adding glazing to the sides of the building, especially on the walkway facing the public area. So we have windows on this side of the building facing out, but we don't have windows facing the public walkway here in the middle because of spatial separation calculations. But we can have up to 60%, so we're thinking about adding some windows to the sides of the building on the inside here, to the outside here on the stairs, if that's a concern. Third point was about consider variations on facade design, and that was taken care of by setting back parts of the building to the back and adding color from the surrounding area so that they blend better and create this interesting facade walking on many red sites. Adding prominent front entry is fourth point under building design. So I guess that means, or it concerns the entrances from the backyard to the building, to the unit. That was not the intent of the design. Having the main entry from the back was the intent, but we could look into options of adding arbors or any landscape elements to emphasize the entrances to the back of those units. Or maybe looking at articulation of the mapping of the building so that those entrances are further prominent. Under landscape design, there was a concern about the retaining wall. We did not touch base on that, but under landscape we're showing, and we worked with a landscape and civil on this to minimize the height of the retaining wall. And the maximum height of the retaining wall achieved was 1.35 meters, which is around here in the middle of the marsh. So for the most part, the neighbors won't see the retaining wall. It will be covered by the fence on their lot. Kate talked about the bollards around the pedestrian walkway, and we're thinking in the future with the electrical engineer, we might add street lights on the laneway and the sidewalk required by the city. The last point on the landscape was about the buffer between the sidewalk and the neighbors, and again, if we could minimize the sidewalk to add some buffer next to those neighbors. That would be, I would suggest that would look better. And this is, again, the proposed variance that the city talked about. That's it for me.
Anything else?
Do you have anything to add?
Specifically about your comments?
Raymond, I'm asking if Raymond has anything to add.
I heard you.
So just to clarify, the laneway access, the sidewalk there is flush, just a different texture along there?
Yeah, so the civil shows how those lanes look like. So the sidewalk is actually concrete and flush with the asphalt off the street, of the laneway.
The idea about just having a couple of small windows, because we're quite limited in terms of the pathway between the buildings, just for kind of more keeping some eyes on the street kind of idea, especially where we have a couple benches and stuff like that, because it is somewhat public oriented that way. So we obviously concerns, and we'll work with, the developer will work with the neighbors over on, Poet's Place or Poet's Trail there, where it's a bit pinched, because the actual right-of-way is only 8 meters. Technically, the road, once you include the curbs and everything, is actually even wider than 8 meters, so the sidewalk will have to get a little pinched there, and hopefully we can work with a little bit of maybe landscaping on their property or dealing with that. So it's very limited, it's very unfortunate the way the lot is laid out, and the easements is what's there, so it's a bit of a challenge. I think that's about it. I think Chris covered it.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. I would ask the panel if they have any questions for staff. Jump in, because I can't see everybody on the screen, so if you have something to say to staff, to speak up. See now?
Hey, Kevin, it's Charles.
Charles, yeah? Yeah.
Just a quick one. I just want clarification of that 2-meter concrete sidewalk that is along the eastern property line. Is a city request or a city requirement, not something that is being, it wasn't the applicant, it was actually coming from the city.
Through the chair, yeah, it's a covenant that's placed on the property that requires a 2-meter walkway along with public access through the site.
Okay, but it doesn't stipulate that it has to be along the eastern boundary, that's just where it's been located.
No, it does stipulate that it needs to be along the southern part of the property. That's the covenanted area there, where the right-of-way is.
Okay, thank you.
I would just further that, would the city be, or can the city look at that covenant and take away part of it for landscape purposes, or does it have to remain for the property?
I believe that it would need to be an amendment to that covenant, if maybe Linda can provide clarification.
Yeah.
But because it specifically says 2 meters.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I just thought I'd check. So, any other questions for staff?
Also, sorry, through the chair, maybe I'll also just add that covenant allows access for the neighbors that back onto that property on the southern edge. They have, through that covenant, access to the back of their property through there as well.
Okay.
And that's kind of where the comment came to, making sure that pedestrian and traffic is accounted for along that southern edge.
Okay. So, anything else for staff? Seeing none, let's open it up to questions to the panel or to the applicant. Let's start with Charles.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I don't have a lot of questions, maybe just a couple of quick ones. And it kind of relates to staff comments maybe a little bit. I was wondering about, I'll call it your rear elevation, so basically your living room, dining room, back patio, which is your front on Menzies. I noticed that you don't have any weather protection or anything for your doors that are going into the dining room area, which I think would be kind of your primary door, and particularly for those Menzies units, which you're kind of treating as a sort of front entry from the street. I'm just wondering if you thought about giving them a little more of an expression of weather protection there, or not.
Want me to answer or you want to answer, Fran? We've talked about it,
So we were considering actually exposing the den on top a bit further towards the street so that it has kind of a recess behind for the dining room as a solution to adding more cover to the door. I can show you what I'm talking about on the 3D here. And then extrude the boards of the den on the top floor here so that the entrance to the dining room is covered.
Okay, that makes sense. And really my other main question was going to kind of revolve around the 2-meter sidewalk, unfortunately. So I don't know, I find it interesting that, the covenant requires this walkway and everything, and then you've done a really nice job of providing a secondary walkway that goes in between the units. And I suspect most people are going to walk into the site and then immediately turn and go down the sidewalk that leads through the landscape in between all your units, instead of walking next to the drive aisle. But I understand that it's a covenant and it's a requirement, so I think it's tough with covenants that you can't, they're kind of fixed in what they define. I like the idea of introducing a little bit more landscape, but I would actually propose that it's between the drive aisle and the sidewalk, not between the sidewalk and the fence. And maybe the 2-meter covenant could be a 1.6 meter, 1.7 meter sidewalk and a 3 meter, or 0.3 meter landscape strip or something. But I don't know if that works or not. Otherwise, I think you've done a really good job of getting, 22 units into the site, and very interesting mix and appearance, and I like the landscaping a lot, so thank you for the presentation.
Thanks, Charles. Gura.
Thank you. Just echo Charles' comments there. Good presentation. A couple quick questions. Is that garbage area for all the units then? That one area?
Yes, it will have 8 smaller garbage bins that will serve the entire development.
Thank you. And then, I guess, I wasn't able to chime in on that staff, but I guess with that covenant and how it's read, would it be my understanding that the neighbors on that south side could use that lane, for example, at a carriage house, or use that property and use that laneway to access their property? Therefore, they would be driving over it, landscape things, and I assume that would be the intent of the covenant, the use of that laneway and that sidewalk for their property.
Through the chair, it's not an actual lane, it's a private access lane, so it wouldn't give them a extra development opportunity like it would if it were an actual lane, so they couldn't have, their lots may be big enough to have a carriage house, but we wouldn't call it an actual lane, it's a private access, just with a right-of-way across it.
And then just I guess for the civil, there's all the existing infrastructures there, so you're not adding any new storm or sewer or water, you're not updating these there.
Yeah, that's correct. There's the infrastructure, like water service to the site that, based on preliminary calcs is adequately sized. Same with the sanitary, and then the storm service is right in the middle of the lot as it heads towards, basically a culvert that heads to the marshy area.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gareth. Marie.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I think it's an interesting lot, and a great location for this kind of townhouse project. My comment, I guess the comment on the form and character would be that I think you do echo the neighborhood. I think it's the neighborhood is actually kind of a contemporary arts and crafts, and I like the way you picked up some of the colors and the lines and the shapes and the height. So you stuck with that, but you've come up with a very distinctive design that still stands out, which is fine. I think the only issue I have with it, and that would be my personal taste, it's a little too uniform, is a sort of a sense of a university campus housing project or something. But I think, that depends on the taste of the people who want to buy into it. And I think you might find that offers a distinct look. And I think the only comment that the city made, having some more glazing on some of the sides, I thought your sign focus is on the 2 ends. And it's often the problem, I think, with townhouses, sides get neglected. You have these sort of big walls with nothing on them. So if there's some way of breaking those up, either with your finishes or with the windows, I think that, especially the walls that are visible to the surrounding neighborhood, that would really help just the appearance of the project as a whole. That'd be my into consideration, and I won't worry about the sidewalk, because other people have talked about it. And the landscaping is great, I like the play area, and walkways through there, I think are good. Help connect it with a great location near the marsh, so thanks very much.
Can I make one comment? Quick comment? Because the tier density requirement, which we kind of submitted late or was requested quite late in the process, we actually have proposed putting green wall or vines going up the sides of the walls that are alternating along and through there. So it's not just all blank walls. So I don't know if Kate wants to talk about it. Sorry, we didn't talk about it. But
No. I didn't talk about it either. It's not on the plan, but we were talking about, in particular, the walls that the adjacent properties would look onto, using kind of like a green screen for plants to grow up. Where Corinne is pointing out. So I think that could add, I don't know, do you think that might be enough?
Well, I was like, windows, the people living in there, the windows are always a help because it adds more light, but it's hard to say. They look like sort of pretty solid walls and some of the sides there.
So if I may add something here, so those walls, in addition to having green walls, the sides will have kind of smaller periphery windows, and we will consider adding some windows on the other side of the building so that it's within the maximum allowed, so that it can kind of have access view to the public walkway in the middle, or pedestrian walkway in the middle.
Well, that would help. Thanks.
Thanks, Brady. Tyler?
Thanks, Kevin, and thanks for the presentation, everyone. One comment that really stood out to me in the staff report, which I do agree with, and I think there's been some comments that may address it, but the redesign the units facing Menzies Ridge Drive, the front entrance facing the street to complete the street frontage and better align with the Hawthorne neighborhood design. I think this is pretty crucial. They're internal facing, and I can understand why that was done, but I do think it's important with any development to think about how it fits in the greater context. And it does still kind of look like the backyard, so just in my opinion, so I do think some effort there. I think, some of the ideas discussed maybe can be pushed a little further and figure out how to have two front entrances, but I do think it's important. That's all I really have to add. I think some of the other comments is, if possible, add some windows and things like that are important. Thank you.
Thanks, Tyler. I really like this project. I like the form and character. I know there was comments regarding whether or not it really fit in with the neighborhood, but I like the minimalist approach to the facades. It's very much, I'm not sure if Raymond would agree, but it's very much finish it where something that's really being promoted in Southgate. I like these materials and colors, and I like the landscape concept as well. The only concern I really have is from that sidewalk connector covenant area, there's really no connection from that to the interior drive aisles to the other units. And you have a sidewalk, Kate, that's right alongside of building D and E, and the sidewalks sort of just end there on both ends. And did you give any thought of running the textural change of the covenant sidewalk? Maybe have a couple of sidewalk textural changes run to that internal sidewalk?
I can comment that the site design, because of was sort of established before I got involved.
Okay.
So I don't know if Raymond or Corinne.
It's just a way to, link the main sidewalk to the main part of the site with textural change in the concrete of the drive aisle, pretty much at 2 points, so that you have a textural change that'll lead you into the one interior road and another textural change that'll run into the other.
So, just a bit, actually, maybe I will, I should have just deflect, sir. So we have, are you referring, we have the pedestrian walk through the site, and then it does connect across the lane, the access laneway, to the required 2-meter sidewalk?
This is a 2-meter sidewalk on the east property line that runs along the fence. Connecting that to the inside of the site, like textural sidewalk changes at a couple of points. One near building E and one near building D.
Well, I don't know about, like, I feel like already there's enough permeability for public access, and I don't know if we want to increase that by going down that center. And we do have, it's a little tighter between units E and D, and so the privacy of those units would be a concern for me.
Sorry, Kate, I don't mean connecting it through there. I just mean from this 2-meter walkway, connecting, having a textual change to go to the side.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, we can certainly
at those 2 points.
contemplate those kinds of things.
Yeah, just a way to allow pedestrians to come from that sidewalk through the main drive aisle to those connecting points of building E and building D. Is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I guess.
So you get that? Okay, and
yes, I do.
the only other thing, being that the buildings are very similar in color and texture, the only thing that I would either ask or recommend is that possibly you can find ways to individualize the units by possibly having a different door color on each unit. Something that will just give each one its own unique thing. I'm not sure, Raymond, if you thought about that or your comments on that.
Yeah, we had a bunch of comments like that, probably actually a while back, so we just haven't done anything in particular with that.
Okay.
I understand, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen it done before, actually. The row house units near Country Club Mall and behind Cal Tire, they did that because most of the units were the same. I found it very effective. But other than that, I very much like the project. I think you've done a great job. Everything kind of just worked out. I really hope that the neighborhood doesn't look at this main drive aisle as being a shortcut to cut through the property. Whether you might need to put speed bumps in there to.
Well, we talked about that quite extensively because Hawthorne area, the subdivision, everybody's parking on the street, and because everybody has secondary suites, there's lots of cars on the street, and because the road is narrow and the boulevards are very wide, there's not a lot of, you can only go one car at a time, right? So it's actually, technically for traffic, it's even narrower than our quote private access, so people are going to want to sneak through. And then we did talk about internally trying to put some texture across it, not speed counts, but texture to slow the cars down through there. So when you're talking about connections between building D and E, that's kind of something that's like that.
Yeah, well, fortunately,
we're just kind of stuck with this easement, which is not really our first choice of how we would have laid out the site. So, and the fact that the city wanted it to be two-way as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. And hopefully that doesn't end up being a problem down the road. There's not a lot of traffic. Menzies Ridge ends there. But I'm not sure if there is a potential shortcut to get to Bird Sanctuary instead of going up Sarah Mock Rise Way. I'm not sure. I didn't really get around that area.
Those were some comments that came back from the amendment process for the site.
Okay.
Kevin's worried about that.
Just on your idea there around crosswalk and pedestrian delineation, there would always be the opportunity to do raised crosswalks.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I could just chime in here, everybody, just going back to the CAC amendments. So we had suggested through the Hawthorne area that we do some traffic calming in in replace, and the engineering department came back to us stating no, but they didn't want it. We're hyper sensitive to this, especially with the neighborhoods, and in particular the two houses on the egress and at Bird Sanctuary / Poets Drive. So we'll address that as it comes, and definitely if there is anything like that, we will be doing traffic calming throughout that. Thank you.
Good, thanks, Steve. That's all I had, basically those two things. So any other questions for the applicant? Seeing none, we do have a variance to discuss if you want to regarding the landscape treatment level. Anybody have any concerns regarding that? Seeing none, so I have basically, it looks like I have 3 recommendations. Charles and I guess Gur jumped in on this too, or Marie did as well. Recommending that the applicant add character as well as weather protection over the units facing Menzies Ridge Drive. Does that pretty much sum up, Charles and Marie, what you were talking about? Okay.
That wasn't my comment. I think Tyler made a comment about emphasizing the front rather than the back.
Yeah, and those were Menzies, Tyler, those were regarding Menzies Ridge, correct?
Yeah, exactly. I think what Charles sort of talked about would actually probably go a long way to addressing the staff.
Yeah, so I think if we address both the character and the weather protection, it kind of covers both of them in one recommendation, so you're fine with that? Okay, look at adding articulation to some of the side units, and I think we will let the applicant deal with whether or not they have windows and or green walls or whatever they want. Are you okay with that?
Sounds good.
Okay, and then my only comment was, recommendation was that the applicant provide pedestrian links from the covenant sidewalk to the corners of buildings D and E. Was there anything else that I missed? See, yeah.
It's not something that I want to make a recommendation because I think it's an impossible task. But I just want to emphasize or put it out there that I think right now that combination, statutory right-of-way, covenant, whatever you want to call it, on drive aisle, it's just going to be a big racetrack for cars. And I would encourage the city, I know it's not necessarily planning, it might be engineering, but whoever it is, to really seriously consider a slightly narrower sidewalk with some landscaping, because that will make all the difference in the world.
Well, if you want to put that into a recommendation, and that, possibly, it probably would be falling on deaf ears because it is a covenant. And covenants, when you change a covenant, you have to go through a major process to do that. Everyone has to sign off.
Well, yeah, and that's why I'm kind of hesitant to make it a recommendation, but I don't know the wording of the covenant, so I just think it's something we encourage them to maybe try and explore together to see if they can find a way to make it work without having to go through the pain of changing the covenant.
Yeah. Well, it'll be in the staff notes, and Laney can bring it up with Vania and whoever else would be necessary. But you have to understand that you have all these neighbors that are joining it with their properties, and they know that covenant's in place, so every single neighbor would have to sign off on that, which what would be involved with that. Pretty difficult to do. But I agree. I agree that have a landscape buffer there. With the individual access to fences on those units could look really, really nice. I guess matter.
Just for some context, the applicant has already actually amended the covenant as well, so that would be a second amendment.
Okay, so seeing that there's no other recommendations and there's no concerns about the variance,
Sorry, before you go too far, there were 2 others that I had heard was
I support it.
find ways to individualize the units, perhaps by using different door colors is what we had. And there was one other redesign to face Menzies Ridge Drive. I don't know if that was
The what?
comment, or if it was,
What was one? Okay.
the other one was possibly redesigning to face Mansard's Drive, that was Tim, mentioned that. So those were two that I thought were recommendations as well. We missed that.
Who was that?
That's included in one of the recommendations that you already made.
So we're okay.
Yeah.
That last one, but not the
Yeah, the
individualization.
individualized units, I think, I went over that with Raymond. Raymond is like, I don't really think it needs to be a recommendation. I think I'll leave it up to Raymond to consider that. So, seeing that there's nothing else, could I get someone to make a motion to accept it as presented with those recommendations and support for the variance?
I'll make that motion.
Charles, and you're okay with support for the variance?
Yep.
Okay, can I get a seconder?
Okay.
Marie? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Nobody opposed?
We can't see what Ger's doing there.
You're okay with
He
it?
said he was in favor.
I'm in favor.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. That motion's carried. Thank you very much.
And are we adjourned?
Yes, motion to adjourn.
Here,
Okay, Marie, seconder. Okay,
Charles?
okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thanks, you guys.
And happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you very much. Happy holidays, everyone, yeah.
Yeah, have a good holiday.
Be safe.
In your house. With the people you've seen for the last year, everything.
Yeah.